old Al-Kharid was shrouded in mist, the cobblestones telling the whispers of the past. It was 1582, a time when supernatural tales went hand in hand with the mundane lives of people living there. Inside the city, there was a grand but decrepit mansion, once majestic from what it seemed years back. Nabeel Siddiqui, a scholar with an insatiable curiosity for the unknown, had recently inherited the mansion from a distant relative. As he stepped through the creaking front door, a chill ran down his spine. The air inside was cold and stale, and the dim light from his lantern cast eerie shadows on the walls. "Welcome, Bilal, Amir," Nabeel called out, his voice ringing out through the empty halls. His two closest friends and fellow explorers of the arcane, Bilal and Amir, followed closely behind. The muscular, pragmatic Bilal had with him a sack of supplies, whereas the youngest of the trio, Amir, carried a stack of ancient tomes and scrolls. "This place gives me the creeps," Bilal muttered, casting a wary glance around. "Are you sure this is where we need to be?" Nabeel nodded, his eyes glinting with determination. "The manuscript I found spoke of an ancient relic hidden within these walls. If the legends are true, this relic holds the power to glimpse into the future and past." As they entered the mansion, the air thickened, and an inexplicable feeling of fear crept over them. The walls seemed to close in, and the shadows danced with a life of their own. They found a portrait of an old man. His eyes seemed to follow their every movement in a dimly lit study. "That's Tariq Siddiqui, the original owner of this mansion," Nabeel explained. "He was said to be a sorcerer who knew all about the forbidden arts." As they studied the portrait, soft whispers filled the room. The hairs on the back of their necks stood upright, and they exchanged uneasy glances with one another. "Did you hear that?" Amir whispered, his voice trembling. Before they could answer, the floor opened up beneath them, and they felt themselves fall into a hidden chamber below. Thud. That was where they landed. The dust-coated manuscripts and age-old artifact-encircled chamber air, thick with the scent of decay and old parchment. Nabeel's lantern cast flickering shadows on the walls. "This must be where Tariq performed his rituals," Nabeel whispered low. "We have to find the relic before it is too late." The whispers grew louder, and the temperature dropped as they went deeper into the chamber. Amir stumbled upon an ornate chest. The lid was covered in strange symbols. "I think I found something," he called out. They drew around the chest, their hearts pounding. As Nabeel opened it with caution, there was a blinding light flooding the room, and the whispers reached a deafening crescendo. The relic lay inside, a small, intricately carved box that seemed to pulsate with some otherworldly energy. Before they even got a chance to react, the door of the chamber slammed shut, locking them in. The walls seemed to close in, and the whispers became menacing laughter. The air grew colder, and darkness deepened. The laughter stopped suddenly, and a voice echoed through the chamber, sending chills down their spines. "You have awakened the curse of Tariq Siddiqui. The relic will reveal your darkest fears, and there will be no escape." As the relic intensified its light, Nabeel, Bilal, and Amir were plunged into a nightmarish realm in which reality interwoven with illusion. They would need all their wits and courage to survive the horrors that awaited them. The walls seemed to twist and distort before them. Nabeel found it hard to keep his composure. Shadows lengthened, took on grotesque forms, whispering secrets that clawed at the edges of their sanity. He turned to Bilal and Amir, their faces pale with fear, but their resolve unwavering. "We have to stay together," Nabeel urged, his voice steady despite the terror gnawing at him. "This relic is the key to breaking the curse. We must find a way to control its power." Bilal nodded, gripping the hilt of his dagger tightly. "If Tariq Siddiqui's knowledge brought this upon us, then perhaps it can also save us. We need to uncover his secrets." Amir, though shivering, felt a spark of determination within himself. I have studied the old manuscripts. There must be something here that can guide us. We just need to decipher it. They began to go over the old texts and symbols adorning the walls. In this, their whispers became clear and coherent in pieces of forbidden knowledge. Darkness crept in, but combined, they slowly started to unwind the mysteries hidden in the relic. Hours passed, and weariness bore down on them. But just when hope was all but lost, they found a hidden passage within the labyrinthine writings. It spoke of a ritual that could banish the curse, but it required a great sacrifice. Nabeel read the passage out loud, his voice steady but laced with fear. To break the curse, one must give it their most prized memory to the relic. Then only will its power be broken. Bilal's hand gripped the dagger tighter. His eyes looked determined. We have no other choice. We cannot let this curse consume us. I'll do it. No, Nabeel said, his voice firm. This was my inheritance, my curiosity that brought us here. I'll make the sacrifice. Amir put a hand on Nabeel's shoulder, his eyes full of understanding. We are in this together. We'll find another way. The three friends stood united, determined to confront the relic's dark power. As they prepared to perform the ritual, a sense of calm settled over them. They knew that whatever the outcome, their bond would endure. Nabeel held the relic in his hands, its light pulsating with malevolent energy. He closed his eyes and murmured a prayer, offering his most treasured memory to the artifact. The room was covered with a blinding light, and the whispers fell silent. When the light faded, the chamber was still and quiet. The relic lay dormant in Nabeel's hands, its power neutralized. The curse had been lifted, but at a great cost. Nabeel's memory of a moment he loved with his family was gone, lost to the relic's insatiable hunger. Bilal and Amir stood by his side, their faces solemn but grateful. You did it, Nabeel, Bilal said softly. You saved us. With that, as they left the mansion and into the morning light, dawn broke forth of mist, casting a warm glow upon the ancient city of Al-Kharid. And the nightmare was over, but it remained within their hearts forever. It was the first rays of dawn, and they seeped through the ancient, dusty windows of the mansion. Nabeel, Bilal, and Amir stood there in the cold light, their exhausted as well as relieved faces carved on their being after a night survived. The relic lay dormant in Nabeel's hands, a chilling reminder of the horrors faced and the great sacrifice made to break the curse. We need to leave this place, Amir said quietly, his eyes darting nervously around the shadowed corners of the room. There's something deeply wrong here. Nabeel nodded, though his heart ached with the memory he had sacrificed. Agreed, but we can't leave without understanding more about Tariq Siddiqui and the source of his dark powers. This relic, it's too dangerous to leave unchecked. Bilal, ever the pragmatist, nodded in agreement. Let's gather what we can from the manuscripts. There might be more hidden truths that can help us understand and perhaps control the relic's power. The three delved into those old texts and manuscripts scattered here and there around the hidden room. The entire place seemed pulsing with such an unnatural power that it gave off the appearance that the dark secrets were infusing life in its walls. There were obscure passages that vaguely pointed to its origins, fables of prescribed rituals and histories of its abusers who tried to gain access to that sort of dark power. Among the many texts, Amir found one that particularly caught his attention. It was yellowed with age and written in a forgotten dialect. This one talks about an ancient society known as the Keepers of the Whisper. They were sworn to protect the relic and ensure it never fell into the wrong hands. Nabeel's eyes widened in interest. The Keepers of the Whisper. This makes sense now. Tariq Siddiqui had to have been one of them, or at least had some relation to them. We need to find out more about this secret society and their connection to this relic. As they delved deeper into the manuscript, A sense of foreboding settled over them. The text spoke of a prophecy, one that foretold the return of the relic's dark power and the chaos that it would eventually create. The prophecy also hinted at a means by which the relic could be permanently neutralized, but it required an ancient artifact known as the Shimmering Key. Bilal scrunched his face up in frown as he read the passage. The Shimmering Key. It says here that it was hidden in a forgotten temple deep within the mountains. We need to find it if we want to ensure the relic remains powerless. They were going to take a journey, one that was going to discover the Shimmering Key and the mysteries of the Whisper Keepers. As they left the mansion to start their quest, a chilling scream pierced through the halls that made them stiffen in shock. "That's coming from outside," Nabeel said as his heart jumped. "We have to check it out." They rushed out to the entrance and stepped through the mist-draped yard. The fog seemed to surround them, sticking to their clothing and obscuring their vision to heighten a sense of unease. She had screamed coming from the graveyard, that forsaken place everyone avoided due to its darkened reputation and whispered tales of legend. As they entered the graveyard, they saw a figure standing with her back to them, buried in obscurity. She turned to face them, revealing a young woman with tear-stained cheeks and eyes that looked terrified. "Help me, please," she cried out, her voice trembling. Nabeel and his friends stepped forward with concern and asked, "What's wrong?" "That is not my question," she said, pointing to her back. The woman introduced herself as Yasmin, who had come to visit her sister's grave when she heard the whispers and saw shadows moving among the tombstones. "It's as if the dead themselves are restless," she whispered, her eyes wide with fear. Nabeel's gaze flickered to the tombstones, where the shadows seemed to writhe and shift. "We need to leave this place," he said urgently. "It's not safe here." As they walked back to the mansion, Yasmin mentioned that she had heard stories of the Keepers of the Whisper from her grandmother, who used to be a guardian of ancient secrets. "My grandmother always warned us never to seek the relic," she said with sadness in her voice. "She said it was cursed and would bring nothing but misery." Nabeel's heart sank. "We have to find the Shimmering Key. It is the only way to ensure that the relic stays powerless and saves the living from the horrors of the past." With Yasmin by their side, the three started off on their journey to the mountains. The road ahead was perilous, and the journey was full of danger, but their determination remained unwavering. They knew that the fate of many lay on their shoulders. Days became weeks as they trekked through dense forests, across rugged terrain, and up steep mountain paths. They encountered many obstacles and perils along the way, from bad weather to wild beasts. But the real danger lay in the shadows, where unseen forces seemed to watch and whisper, waiting for the right moment to strike. One night, as they camped at the foot of a mountain peak towering over them, Nabeel couldn't help but have a strange, uncomfortable feeling that they were being watched. The flickering dance of shadows thrown by the firelight on surrounding rocks made the scene spooky and otherworldly. He glanced over at Yasmin, who was quietly tending to the fire, and back at Bilal and Amir, who were discussing their plans for the climb the next day. "We have to be careful," Nabeel said softly, his voice laced with a sense of urgency. "Something is out there, watching us." Bilal nodded, his eyes scanning the darkness. "We'll take turns keeping watch. We can't afford to let our guard down." Nightfall was followed by shifts, making sure that one of them stayed awake at all times. Thoughts of the relic, the Shimmering Key, and the mysterious Keepers of the Whisper swirled in Nabeel's head. He knew that their journey was far from over, and that the true test of their courage and resolve was yet to come. In the still of the morning hours, while Nabeel was about to take his shift on watch, he heard an almost inaudible whispering sound, resembling the rustle of leaves swaying in the wind. His heart pounding with excitement, Nabeel bent forward to try and listen further. The sound grew louder still, and the direction from whence it came had to be near the mountaintop. Nabeel woke Bilal with an urgent whisper, "Wake up!" I heard something. It's coming from the peak." Bilal abruptly opened his eyes and woke Amir and Yasmin, and they grabbed their belongings and headed towards the peak, drawn in by the weird whispers echoing somewhere in front of them. As they ascend, the air continues to grow colder and much more desolate. The whispers seem to be all around them, and the echoed jagged rocks began to fill their minds with the sense that something ominous lay ahead. Finally, they found themselves on a narrow ledge overlooking a secret valley, where a distant temple lay nestled, its stone walls weathered and covered in intricate carvings. "This must be it," Amir said, his voice filled with awe. "The Temple of the Shimmering Key." Renewed determination brought them to the temple. Their hearts thumped in their chests with fear and hope, for the journey had led them to the very threshold of a hidden world. There, in the dark depths, secrets from the past were waiting for them. Yet as they pushed into the darkness, they knew the real test of their courage and resolve was just beginning. The entrance to the ancient temple before them seemed tall, with weathered stone walls bearing deep carvings of forgotten rituals and mysterious symbols. As they stepped inside, a cold breeze swept through the narrow passageway and sent a chill down their spines. The interior of the temple cast eerie shadows on the walls because of dim torches. Nabeel, Bilal, Amir, and Yasmin moved cautiously into the temple, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The air was heavy with the smell of damp stone and ancient incense, weighing heavily on their hearts. "This place feels like it's alive," Amir whispered, his voice barely audible. Nabeel nodded, his eyes scanning the walls for any clue. "We have to find the Shimmering Key. According to the manuscripts, it has to be somewhere in this temple." Further in, they reached a chamber of stone sarcophagi, standing row upon row. Each of the sarcophagi was filled with intricate carvings and symbols. The air was so silent that an impending sense hung heavy over everything. "This must be the resting place of the Keepers of the Whisper," Bilal said, his voice hushed in reverence. Nabeel approached one of the sarcophagi and examined the carvings. "These symbols, they look similar to the ones we saw in the mansion. They must hold the key to finding the Shimmering Key." As they analyzed the carvings, Yasmin saw that there was a pattern of interlocking symbols. "Look at this," she said, pointing to the pattern. "It looks like it's a map of the temple." Nabeel traced the pattern with his finger, narrowing his eyes as he concentrated. "I think you're right, Yasmin. If we follow this map, it should take us to the Shimmering Key." Following the map, they trekked through the twisting passages of the temple, one step at a time, as each led them closer to the core of the ancient building. The whispers were louder now, and the shadows seemed to press in on all sides, but they pushed on, driven by a determination to find the key. It took forever, and still, they ended up at this great hall, in an otherworldly illumination. In the center of this great hall, upon a pedestal lay the Shimmering Key. The radiance emanating from the key gave off this heavenly glow. There was something like warmth that spilled from this, and golden radiance lighted up the space. Nabeel stood up before the pedestal, with racing heart, now that they found it. "We have finally found it," he exclaimed to his brothers. "The Shimmering Key." As he reached out to take the key, there was suddenly a jolt of tremor that ran through the chamber, and the walls began to shift and change, the carvings on the wall coming to life with scenes of chaos and destruction. "The temple is reacting to our presence," Amir said, his voice tense. "We need to be careful." Nabeel delicately lifted the Shimmering Key off the pedestal, and the rumblings stopped. It was as though the chamber had been turned silent again, the congestion in the air gone, and in its place, a stillness and silence. Having grasped the key, they backtracked and made their way towards the temple's entrance. Long and laborious had been the journey, but their will was paid off as they succeeded in finding the Shimmering Key and thus could guarantee that the relic remained powerless. As they came out of the temple, the first rays of dawn broke over the mountains, spreading a warm glow over the landscape. They stood there for a moment, taking their breath, and gazed at the sunrise. "We did it," Bilal said with a smile on his face, relief written across it. "Now we can go back to the mansion and finish what we started." Their return to the mansion was quiet, but the burden of the quest lay heavily upon them. They knew that the greatest challenge was ahead, and that only the final face-to-face with the evil power of the relic could be ultimately conquered by their might and valor. When they arrived at the mansion, again they found that the courtyard was shrouded in mist once more. The air was heavy with tension, and an eerie silence hung over the ancient structure. They knew that the relic's power had not been fully neutralized, and that they needed to perform the final ritual to ensure its containment. Nabeel placed the shimmering key on the ground and began to prepare for the ritual. He carefully laid out the ancient manuscripts and lit a series of candles, their flickering flames casting long shadows on the walls. "The ritual requires us to use the shimmering key to bind the relic's power," Nabeel explained. "We must perform the incantations exactly as described in the manuscripts. Any mistake could be disastrous." The air turned cold as they started the ritual, and the whispers came back, growing louder and more urgent. The shadows writhed and twisted into grotesque forms that clawed at the edges of their sanity. Nabeel's voice remained steady as he chanted the incantations, his hands steady as he guided the shimmering key through the ritual motions. Bilal, Amir, and Yasmin stood by his side, their faces etched with determination and fear. As the ritual reached its climax, a blinding light filled the chamber, and the whispers reached a deafening crescendo. The relic's power surged, and the shadows closed in, threatening to consume them. But just as all hope seemed lost, the shimmering key emitted a brilliant light, and the shadows retreated. The relic's power was held at bay, and the whispers fell silent. Exhausted but relieved, Nabeel and his friends collapsed to the ground, their hearts pounding with the intensity of the ritual. They had succeeded in neutralizing the relic's power, but the cost had been great. As they caught their breath, Nabeel looked around at his friends, his voice filled with gratitude. "We did it. We've contained the relic's power. The curse is finally broken." Bilal nodded, his eyes filled with determination. "We've come this far. We can't let our guard down. We need to ensure that the relic remains contained and that its power is never unleashed again." They made their way out of the mansion with the shimmering key, all their mission accomplished. The dawn light painted the ancient city of Al-Kharid with the warmth of hope and renewal. As they walked away from the mansion, they knew that their journey had only just begun. The keepers of the Whisper had left behind a legacy of secrets and mysteries, and it was up to them to ensure that the past remained buried and that the future was protected from the darkness. It was early morning in Al-Kharid, and the sun was climbing high into the sky, casting long shadows across cobblestone streets. Nabeel, Bilal, Amir, and Yasmin were amongst the bustle of market without any clear thought on their minds as regards the days past. The relic was now powerless, but this had by no means ended the journey. Nabeel's thoughts ran wild with questions as he walked. They had partially fulfilled the prophecy and had successfully contained the relic's power. Yet, the truth behind the secretive society of Keepers of the Whisper and its relation to the ancient artifact still lay in obscurity. He knew that this was a key factor that must be unraveled for the sake of never allowing the relic's power to be unleashed again. "Where do we go from here?" Amir asked, shattering the silence. "We have kept the relic at bay, but what about the Keepers of the Whisper? We need to know more." Nabeel nodded thoughtfully. "Agreed. We need to find someone with knowledge of the Keepers. Yasmin, You said your grandmother was a guardian of ancient secrets. Do you think she can help us?" Yasmin's eyes brightened with hope. "Yes, my grandmother, Aisha, lives in a village not far from here. She's a wise woman with deep knowledge of our history and traditions. She might have the answers we're looking for." They traveled to the village where Aisha lived. They knew they had their next destination set, and that this was a journey full of anticipation and fear, as they were seeking answers that might determine the truth behind the relic and its dark power. The village lay within a beautiful valley, which the rolling hills and green fields enveloped. The cottage in which Aisha lived was not large, yet it seemed welcoming and cared for, full of the rich aromas of herbs and spices wafting to greet the arrivals. Yasmin knocked at the door, and an old gentlewoman appeared. Her kind eyes smiled while looking at her, and she says, "Yasmin, dear my daughter, why did you come to me?" End. "Grandmother, these are my friends, Nabeel, Bilal, and Amir," Yasmin said, introducing them. "We have come seeking your wisdom. We've stumbled upon something dark and dangerous, and we feel you may hold the knowledge that will guide us." Aisha's expression turned serious as she listened to their story. She welcomed them into her abode and motioned for them to take seats around a large wooden table. The room was filled with shelves of ancient books, jars of herbs, and mysterious artifacts, all known to have some history or significance behind them. Nabeel told her everything, from finding the relic in the mansion to the whispers and shadows. Aisha listened attentively, her eyes filled with concern and understanding. The Keepers of the Whisper were an ancient society that protected powerful relics, ensuring they did not fall into the wrong hands, Aisha explained. They possessed forbidden knowledge and performed rituals to protect our world from dark forces. Tariq Siddiqui was one of the last known keepers, but his lust for power led him down a dangerous path. Aisha continues, her voice heavy with regret. This relic you chanced upon was called the Whispering Eye. They said it would reveal pasts and futures as well. Such a powerful relic was said to be a very wise tool of the past. However, placed in the wrong hands, chaos was the one thing that bloomed from such a tool. The Keepers sealed its might, but years went by to weaken the seal. We were able to curb its energy with the shimmering key, Nabeel said, pulling out the key to show Aisha. But we need to keep it closed. Is there any method by which the seal can be made permanent? Aisha nodded. There is a ritual, known as the Eternal Binding, that can permanently neutralize the Whispering Eye's power. However, it requires the combined efforts of several powerful artifacts, each hidden in different locations, guarded by ancient protectors. Bilal's eyes narrowed with determination. We'll do whatever it takes, Aisha. We can't let the relic's power harm anyone else. Aisha smiled quietly. I like your spirit. Your first artifact is the Heart of Anwar. It's said to be a crystal imbued with a wise and just ruler's essence. It's supposed to be hidden deep within the ruins of this ancient fortress, way out in the desert. Having made this new decision clear, the group prepared to head to the desert fortress. Aisha gave them supplies and a map by which to guide their way. It was off into the unknown as they left the village. Yasmin glanced back at her grandmother, who waved and called out, May the light guide you and protect you on your journey. The desert was far, a long way and hard to get to, and the sun pounded them mercilessly as the endless sand dunes stretched out before them in all directions. Still, they kept going, because they knew the fate of so many people hung in the balance. Days had passed in the endless travel, and at last, they were outside the old aged fortress, ruins sprawling out in a jumble half buried by shifting sands, remnants of some bygone epoch where history went. It was as if heat sat over them, wind whirred once in a while with whisperings from times gone by and shattered the dead silence. As they made their way into the fort, they were presented with a maze of crumbling walls and dark corridors. The atmosphere was filled with foreboding, and darkness seemed to lean on them from all sides. We must stick together and keep our heads clear, Nabeel warned. The heart of Anwar is somewhere in this ruin, and we have to be ready for whatever comes our way. The group moved slowly through the fortress, with tensed senses by the oppressive silence, and with the strange shadows dancing on the walls. As they progressed, they found old traps and obstacles, each of which had been designed to fend off the one who might be looking to obtain the heart of Anwar. At last, they reached a grand chamber, whose walls were carved with delicate details of scenes in which a wise ruler was giving justice and peace to his people. In the center of the chamber was a pedestal upon which rested the heart of Anwar, a crystal that glowed with a soft, soothing light. Nabeel walked toward the pedestal, his heart filled with awe and reverence. "We found it," he whispered. "The heart of Anwar." As he reached out to touch the crystal, a voice reverberated in the chamber, old and wise. "Only those with pure hearts and noble intentions may take the heart of Anwar. Prove yourselves worthy." Nabeel, Bilal, Amir, and Yasmin stood in front of the pedestal, their hearts filled with determination and a purpose. They knew that their journey brought them to this moment, and that their bonding and determination would be put to test. One by one, they stepped forth and recounted the journey, their sacrifices, and their unwavering commitment toward protecting the world from the dark power of this relic. It seemed to weigh their words as well as hearts. Finally, the voice once again spoke forth, its tones filled with an air of approbation. "You have proven yourselves worthy. Take the heart of Anwar and wield its power with wisdom." Nabeel carefully lifted the crystal from the pedestal. The soothing light filled the chamber with a sense of peace and hope. With the first artifact in hand, they knew that their journey was far from over, but they felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. As they left the fortress and headed back to the village, the desert sun began to set, casting long shadows across the sand. The whispers of the past seemed to fade, replaced by the promise of a brighter future. The return journey towards the village was filled with renewed direction. The heart of Anwar, now held safely within their grasp, throbbed with an almost calming light. Nabeel, Bilal, Amir, and Yasmin were aware that this artifact was only one among many they had to collect to successfully undergo the eternal binding ritual. Determination was not lost, but each of them would soon realize the challenges waiting for them. As they approached the village, the familiar sight of Aisha's cottage brought relief. Aisha welcomed them back with open arms, her eyes filled with pride and concern. "You've done well to retrieve the heart of Anwar," she said, her voice filled with warmth. "But your journey is far from over." Nabeel nodded, his expression resolute. "We understand, Aisha. What is the next artifact we need to find?" Aisha's eyes turned blank as she recalled ancient tales passed down through generations. "The next artifact you seek is the Shadow's Tear, a gem that holds the essence of the night. It is said to be guarded by a powerful entity known as the Guardian of Shadows. The gem is hidden deep within the enchanted forest, a place where reality and illusion intertwine." Everyone exchanged determined glances. They knew the enchanted forest was a place of mystery and possible danger, but nothing could sway their minds. Armed with Aisha's new map and guide, they set off towards the forest, their hearts steeled for the trials that awaited them. It took several days to reach the enchanted forest, and each day was filled with a sense of anticipation and trepidation. The air grew cooler as they approached the forest, and the landscape became increasingly wild and untamed. The trees towered above them, their branches forming a dense canopy that cast long, shifting shadows on the forest floor. The entrance was marked by a very old stone archway that was covered with moss and vines. As they passed under it, a sort of foreboding settled on them, and the whispers of the forest beckoned them in. "We have to keep our noses together and keep our wits sharp," Bilal warned, his eyes scanning the shadows. "A guardian of shadows isn't an easy opponent. We have to be ready for anything." Nabeel nodded in agreement. We have to look for the shadow's tear and not lose ourselves in the illusions of the forest. Trust your instincts and stay alert. As they ventured further into the enchanted forest, the atmosphere became more surreal and otherworldly. The trees appeared to warp and change form, their shapes morphing into strange and unsettling silhouettes. The air was heavy with damp earth and ancient magic, and the shadows danced as if alive. Amir, ever the scholar, made a note of the weird symbols and markings all over the trees. These symbols, they seem to be guiding us, he observed. We should follow them. The group followed the symbols, their path winding through trails and hidden clearings. The forest seemed to come alive around them, its whispers growing louder and more insistent. At times they saw fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures moving among the trees, but they pressed on, determined to find the shadow's tear. Finally, they reached a clearing lit by a silvery, eerie light. Before them stood the guardian of shadows, a towering, shadowy figure whose shape kept shifting and indistinct. In his hands, it grasped the shadow's tear, a gem radiating with a deep, dark light. "Welcome, seekers," the guardian's voice called out from the clearing, old and otherworldly. "You have come for the shadow's tear, but it is not easily given. You must prove yourselves worthy." Nabeel stepped forward, his voice steady and respectful. "We seek the shadow's tear to perform the eternal binding ritual and protect our world from a great darkness. We are prepared to face any challenge you set before us." The guardian looked at them with eyes that seemed to pierce their very souls. "Very well. To prove yourselves, you must face your deepest fears and overcome the shadows within your hearts." As the guardian spoke, the clearing seemed to shift and change, and each member of the group found himself standing alone in a nightmarish landscape. The forest had taken on a new, terrifying form, and they were each confronted by their darkest fears. Nabeel was once again in the dilapidated mansion, but this time it was filled with shadowy figures whispering his name and clawing at the edges of his sanity. He steeled himself for this encounter, knowing that he had to face these phantoms head-on. With each step, he faced the shadows, confronting the guilt and fear that had haunted him since he first discovered the relic. All the surroundings of Bilal changed to a battlefield, and the cries of the wounded and dying filled in the air. But his deep fear of losing those he loves weighed on his heart, as he moved with a determination in his heart. He was in a gigantic, dark library, whose shelves were full of forbidden knowledge. The temptation to power and the fear of losing himself to it clawed at him, but he resisted and reminded himself that their mission was important and how much he and his friends cared for each other. Yasmin stood in a desolate wasteland, where the whispers of the past threatened to overwhelm her. The weight of her family's legacy, coupled with her fear of losing her loved ones, was almost too much for her to bear. But the memories of her grandmother and the knowledge that she was not alone gave her the strength to keep going. As they confronted their phobias, the shadows started to withdraw, and the horrors of the landscapes disappeared. They found themselves back inside the clearing where they all stood, facing the guardian of shadows, whose face was now filled with a newfound strength and determination within the hearts of those warriors. The guardian nodded, then shifted into another form. "You have proven yourselves worthy. The shadow's tear is yours." With great respect, Nabeel took the gem from the guardian's hands. The shadow's tear now glowed with a deep, dark radiance, its power entrusted to them. "Thank you," Nabeel said, his voice filled with gratitude. "We will use the shadow's tear to protect our world and ensure that the darkness is contained." The guardian's form began to fade, its voice echoing through the clearing. "May light guide you along your way. The path ahead is fraught with danger, but your hearts are strong. Trust in each other, and you will prevail." In this respect, when the guardian disappears, the group experienced an overwhelming sense of awe and humility. Having survived their most horrifying fears, they consolidated their wills in a unified goal of saving the world from the relic's dark power. With the shadow's tear, they went their way back from the enchanted forest, with the path open and free from illusions. Having left the forest and coming into the open air, the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, bathing the landscape with a warm glow. Though not yet over their journey, it was a refreshing sense of hope and determination which they felt this time. This was because in their possession, they had the heart of Anwar and the shadow's tear, one step towards performing the ritual of eternal binding and ensuring forever that the power of the relic remained sealed inside. The return journey to the village was a feeling of triumph and hope. Now, with the heart of Anwar and the shadow's tear safely in their possession, Nabeel, Bilal, Amir, and Yasmin were rejuvenated. They knew, however, that their task was still not complete, and much more would be needed before they could perform the eternal binding ritual. Now, as they stood in front of Aisha's cottage, the familiar scene brought comfort. Aisha stepped out of the cottage herself, with a smile that would warm the coldest of hearts, and a glint in her eyes that said she was proud. "Well done on getting the heart of Anwar and the shadow's tear," she said warmly. "But your journey is not quite over." "The next artifact," answered Nabeel resolutely as he asked, "What is the next artifact we need to retrieve?" Aisha's eyes went pensive, recounting ancient tales. "The final artifact you seek is the Serpent's Fang, a blade imbued with the essence of a powerful serpent. It is hidden in the depths of a treacherous cavern known as the Serpent's Lair, guarded by the Serpent Queen herself." They locked their gaze and showed an intent face to the fellow travelers. Though it would prove dangerous at Serpent's Lair, nothing broke them off course. They, accompanied by a new map guided by Aisha, move ahead of them in that cavernous darkness toward danger and adventures awaiting them in every turn and curve. The journey to the Serpent's Lair took several days, each one filled with a sense of anticipation and trepidation. As they neared the cavern, the landscape became increasingly rugged and desolate. The air grew cooler, and the sky darkened with storm clouds, casting an eerie shadow over the land. A jagged rock formation marked the entrance to the Serpent's Lair, resembling the open jaws of a serpent. As they went through the entrance, a feeling of foreboding settled over them, and the darkness seemed to press in around them. "We have to keep close and watchful," Bilal warned, his eyes scanning the darkness. "The Serpent Queen is supposed to be a fierce protector, so we should be ready for anything." Nabeel nodded in agreement. "We have to find the Serpent's Fang and not get caught in the cavern's danger. Use your instincts and keep your head on your shoulders." As they ventured deeper into the Serpent's Lair, the air grew colder and more oppressive. The walls of the cavern were lined with jagged rock formations that seemed to twist and writhe like the coils of a serpent. The atmosphere was heavy with a sense of danger, and the sound of dripping water echoed through the darkness. Amir, ever a scholar, kept an eye open for the markings on the stone walls, these symbols. "These seem to direct us," observed Amir. "We must see where they guide us." The group followed the symbols, whose path led through winding tunnels and narrow passages. Seemingly, the cavern came to life around them, its shadows shifting and moving as if guided by an invisible power. Other times, they heard the distant hiss of serpents. Still, they pressed on determinedly in search of the Serpent's Fang. Finally, they reached a great chamber that was illuminated by an unearthly greenish glow. In the middle of the chamber stood a tall, imposing figure. The Serpent Queen, her eyes were aglow with a predatory light, and in her hands she grasped the Serpent's Fang, a blade that glowed with a sinister energy. "Welcome, seekers," the Serpent Queen's voice boomed in the chamber, ageless and powerful. "You seek the Serpent's Fang. It is not so easily given. You must prove yourselves worthy." Nabeel stepped forward, his voice deep and respectful. "We come seeking the Serpent's Fang to perform the eternal binding ritual to save our world from a great darkness. We are willing to face whatever challenge you set before us." The Serpent Queen looked at them with eyes that seemed to pierce their very souls. Very well. To prove yourselves, you must face the trials of the serpent's lair and overcome the challenges within. As the Serpent Queen spoke, the chamber seemed to shift and change, and the group found themselves separated and standing in different parts of the cavern, each confronted by a unique challenge. Nabeel found himself in a very narrow tunnel of writhing serpents, his heart hating it vehemently. They hissed and coiled around him, their eyes shining with an evil light. Steeled himself, he had to find his way through the tunnel to the other side. Every step he made was carefully taken, bypassing the masses of serpents, and his gaze was focused on the path he was taking. Bilal's surroundings shifted into a dark, winding maze filled with traps and obstacles. His fear of failing his friends weighed heavily on him, but he pressed on, determined to find his way through the maze and ensure their safety. He relied on his strength and instincts to overcome each trap and navigate the labyrinth. Amir found himself in a chamber full of ancient scrolls and artifacts. The forbidden allure of forbidden knowledge and the fear of losing himself to it clawed at him, but he resisted, reminding himself of the importance of their mission and the bond he shared with his friends. He took his time and examined each scroll carefully, seeking clues that could help him conquer the challenge. Yasmin stood in a cave of illusions and mirages. The burden of her family's legacy weighed on her, and the fear of losing her loved ones, but she found solace in her grandmother's memory and knew that she was not alone. She kept her mind on the truth and used intuition to see past the illusions, thus navigating through the cave. As each of them overcame their own challenge, the shadows retreated, and the nightmarish landscapes receded. They stood once again in the grand chamber before the Serpent Queen, their hearts now full of strength and determination. The Serpent Queen nodded, her eyes full of approval. You have proven yourselves worthy. The Serpent's Fang is yours. With utmost respect, Nabeel took the blade from the Serpent Queen's hands. The Serpent's Fang was now imbued with a malevolent energy, and its power was now theirs to wield. Thank you, Nabeel said, his voice full of gratitude. We will use the Serpent's Fang to protect our world and make sure that the darkness is contained. The Serpent Queen's form started to fade away, her voice echoing through the chamber. May the light guide you on your journey. The path ahead is fraught with danger, but your hearts are strong. Trust in each other, and you will prevail. As the Serpent Queen vanished, the group felt a sense of awe and humility. They had faced their greatest challenges and emerged stronger, united in their mission to protect the world from the relic's dark power. With the Serpent's Fang in hand, they returned through the Serpent's lair, which was now free of dangers and clear. When they left the cavern and came out into the open air, the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a warm glow over the landscape. Their journey was far from over, but they felt a renewed sense of hope and determination. With the heart of Anwar, the Shadow's Tear, and the Serpent's Fang in their possession, they were one step closer to performing the eternal binding ritual and ensuring that the relic's power remained sealed forever. The trio stood on the hilltop, overlooking the ancient mansion where their journey had begun. The dawn light bathed the landscape in a warm golden glow, casting long shadows that seemed to whisper of the past and the trials they had faced. With the heart of Anwar, the Shadow's Tear, and the Serpent's Fang in their possession, they were ready to perform the eternal binding ritual and ensure that the relic's dark power would remain sealed forever. Nabeel, Bilal, Amir, and Yasmin returned back to the mansion with full hearts and determined souls. Upon entering the courtyard, the same sense of foreboding settled over them once again, reminding them of the dark forces they had met inside those walls. We have to prepare for the ritual, Nabeel said, his voice steady and unflinching. The manuscripts describe the steps we have to follow. We can't afford any mistakes. The crowd assembled in the grand hall, the same place where they discovered the relic and accidentally released its dark power. The room was heavy with oppressive silence, and the air vibrated with a very tangible sense of tenseness. They placed the ancient manuscripts, the Heart of Anwar, the Shadow's Tear, and the Serpent's Fang on a large, ornate table. Amir carefully read the manuscripts, narrowing his eyes with intense concentration. The eternal binding ritual will have us utilize the 3 artifacts in channeling our energy in order to seal the relic's power. We will perform incantations just as it was written, and everyone will have to take a different role. Bilal nodded determinedly. Let's start now. We can't let the relic's power destroy any other soul. The mood became dark, and the shadows pressed into them as they started performing the ritual. Nabeel took the Heart of Anwar and the reassuring light that flooded the room with warmth and comfort. Closing his eyes, he focused on the ancient incantations and kept his voice steady and peaceful. Amir held the Shadow's Tear, its dark radiance pulsing with an otherworldly energy. He chanted the words inscribed in the manuscripts, his voice filled with determination and resolve. Yasmin, with the Serpent's Fang in hand, joined in the incantation, her voice unwavering and strong. Bilal stood by their side, his presence a source of strength and support. As the incantations grew louder, the relic began to react, its dark energy surging and pulsing. The shadows writhed and twisted, and the whispers grew louder, filling the room with a cacophony of voices. The group continued chanting, their voices blending into a powerful harmony. The 3 artifacts began to glow with an intense light, their energies merging and forming a protective barrier around the relic. The air crackled with energy, and the very walls of the mansion seemed to tremble. Suddenly, the whispers stopped, and a blinding light filled the room. The dark power of the relic surged one last time, then began to fade, its energy contained by the combined power of the 3 artifacts. The light brightened, and the shadows were driven back, banished by the force of their resolve. As night deepened, the room fell silent, and oppression lifted. The relic rested dormant on the table, neutralizing its dark energy. Heart of Anwar, the Shadow's Tear, and the Serpent's Fang shone soft, gentle beacons, now forces that offered hope and protection. Nabeel, Bilal, Amir, and Yasmin, exhausted but relieved, collapsed on the ground, their heartbeats pounding as if a tamed beast was behind them. They had managed to do the eternal binding ritual, but at what price? Nabeel looks at all the friends. We did it, his gratitude and pride rich in his voice. We bound the relic's power. The curse is now over. Bilal nodded, determination flashing in his eyes. We have come this far. We cannot let our guard down. We need to ensure that the relic remains contained and that its power is never unleashed again. With the ritual over, they all left the mansion, knowing their mission had been accomplished. The dawn sun bathed the ancient city of Al-Kharid in warm tones, as if symbolizing hope and renewal. They knew that their journey had not only changed their lives, but also secured the future from the darkness that threatened to engulf it. As they stood together, the very fabric of camaraderie and achievement had filled their hearts. Their bond had been tempered in the crucible of danger and uncertainty, having emerged stronger and unbreakable. They had faced their deepest fears, confronted shadows of the past, and emerged victorious. They knew that the journey was coming to an end, with the relic's power sealed and the eternal binding ritual completed. The lessons they had learned and the strength they had gained would forever stay with them. Nabeel turned toward his friends with a smile of gratitude on his face. Thank you all for standing by me and for your unwavering support. I couldn't have done this without you. Yasmin placed her hand on Nabeel's shoulder with warm eyes. We did this together, Nabeel. Our strength is in our unity. Amir nodded his head, and his voice had a conviction that ran deep within. We faced the darkness and came out stronger. The journey may have come to an end, but our bond remains. Bilal, ever the pragmatist, added, "Let's ensure that the relic remains safe and that its power is never unleashed again. We owe it to ourselves and to the future." As they journeyed back to the village, they felt rejuvenated with renewed hope and a sense of purpose. The dark power of the relic was sealed, and Al-Kharid, the ancient city, was safe once more. They knew that their journey had been a test of their courage, resolve, and friendship, and they had emerged victorious. As they walked through the village, the villagers greeted them with smiles and expressions of gratitude. Aisha welcomed them back with open arms, her eyes filled with pride. "You have done well," she said, her voice filled with warmth. "You have protected our world from a great darkness and ensured that the past remains buried." Nabeel, Bilal, Amir, and Yasmin stood together with hearts full of accomplishment and satisfaction. They realized that their journey had not only changed their lives, but it also protected the future from the darkness of the past. As they stood together, warm golden dawn upon them lighted the village. She too had spoken her silent talk. The echoes were silenced and left in the silence of a brighter future. They had met the darkness head-on and won. Their bond was stronger than ever. And so, as the sun rose over the ancient city of Al-Kharid, Nabeel, Bilal, Amir, and Yasmin knew that their journey had been worth every trial and tribulation. They had protected the world from a great darkness, and in doing so, they had found strength, unity, and hope